Welcome, everybody. Today we'll talk about the language of prayer. And so, just as an introduction, when we learned with Benedict Masechet Megillah, we discussed the different things that the Mishnah allows to be read in other languages. And unfortunately, Megillat Esther, the Book of Esther, is not one of them. But prayer, because it was rabbinical, is a lot more lenient in that way. So, the mitzvah of prayer is ideally performed in Hebrew, for that is the language in which Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the people of the Great Assembly, composed the wording of prayer, and it is the holy tongue which was used to create the world. So, 150 years ago, when Eliezer ben Yehuda and his friends tried to revive the Hebrew language, there was a great opposition to them because the people believed that the holy tongue, the Lashon HaKodesh, literally, is only for prayer and for study of Torah and not for every day. And that's why there was Ladino in Spain and Spanish-speaking countries and Yiddish in European countries. And Esperanto was invented by Zamenhof, who's also Jewish. He wanted to make an international language. But the idea of the holy tongue, there was a great opposition. Personally, I think that it's amazing that we have so many Hebrew words for words that aren't mentioned anywhere in the Tanakh. But a lot of the words that they invented are based on the Tanakh and the Mishnah, and even the Talmud. And Rabbi Herzfeld gave an example a while ago about, I think it was Parshat Vayera, about the daughter of Lot, that she was Riba. So, anyway, so back to prayer. However, the avad, which means if you didn't do it the first way possible, which was recommended, a person who does not understand Hebrew may fulfill his obligation in other languages. And he's going to discuss later that it has to be a language that you actually understand. So, just a silly example: if I don't speak French and I'm praying from a French siddur, I'm definitely not fulfilling my obligation because I don't understand anything that I'm reading. So there's a fundamental difference between the person who prays in Hebrew and the person who prays in another language. The one who prays in a different language does not fulfill his obligation without understanding the meaning of the words he is reciting. However, one who prays in Hebrew fulfills their obligation even if they do not understand the meaning of the words. And that's why we have Hebrew school, and we teach the kids the Shema, we teach the kids the blessings, especially the Shmoneh Esrei, especially in preparation for Bar and Bat Mitzvah. So I think it's very important to remember that even if we don't understand the Hebrew, we still teach how to read it, and because it is written already more than 1800 years ago, that we are able to fulfill our obligation even if we don't understand completely. Still, even one who prays in Hebrew is obligated to understand the meaning of the first verse of the Shema, which is the Oraita, biblical commandment, and the first blessing of the Amidah, because not having kavana intention, like we discussed earlier this week, for those parts of prayer prevents them from fulfilling their obligation. In contrast to other languages, Hebrew has intrinsic value, since the Torah was given to us in Hebrew, and it was used to create the world. Baal Tanya in the first chapter, I think it's the first chapter, maybe a little bit later, he talks about the five motzaot peh, the five sounds that we have in our mouth, and he goes from the outer all the way to the inner. So the first one is lips, then teeth, then palate, then tongue, and then throat. So all of these are eternal, and that's how the Torah was written. And we don't know how to pronounce all the letters properly, but we know that this is the original language, even before the Tower of Babel. Even a person who does not understand Hebrew can fulfill the mitzvah by praying in the holy tongue because of its inherent significance. However, the value of every other language derives from the fact that it expresses the person's thoughts and feelings. So we don't undermine that. It's very important to understand what you're saying. So therefore, hence a person who does not understand the language that he is saying renders the words useless. That's the example I gave about somebody not knowing the language of the Siddur in whatever language it is other than Hebrew, and therefore cannot use it to recite the Shema and the rest of the prayers. In practice, a person who does not understand Hebrew is permitted to choose the language in which they want to pray, although the advantage of praying in the language that he understands is that they can concentrate on the words. On the other hand, one who prays in Hebrew has the benefit of praying in the Holy Tongue, for every Hebrew letter is directed toward the rectification of all the spiritual worlds, and that's a little bit beyond my pay, but this is the words of the Kaf Chaim and the Bura Halacha, which is a commentary of the Mishnah Bura of the Chafetz Chaim from just about 100 years ago. Permission to pray in any language is granted as a temporary concession. It's called Kehorat Sha'ah, meaning that we should try to grow and learn how to understand the Hebrew language as much as possible, especially for prayer, and specifically for people who do not understand Hebrew. However, it is prohibited to establish a minyan, meaning a congregation or service that will regularly pray in a different language. This is a little bit of a political comment, but I told you already how much Rabbi Melamed loves Israel and the people of Israel. So he's not criticizing them for the sake of criticizing. He's just saying that we should try to avoid doing this mistake again. This was one of the sins of the Reform movement, which translated the prayers to German and established prayer services in a foreign tongue, causing generations after them to forget the Holy Tongue, thereby giving way to the abandonment of Judaism and assimilation. And as Sheldon Cooper would call it, fun fact, Rabbi Moshe Mendelssohn, the first reformer, the person who established the Reform movement, has no Jewish descendants today. And neither does Theodor Herzl, as great as they were. Because of this misunderstanding of what is holy, they do not have any Jewish descendants today. And again, I'll just give quickly. My father said that he was a scientist, and he said that scientists were able to create a synthetic potato, and the only way they could discern if this was synthetic or real was when they planted it in the ground. The synthetic potato, even though it tasted, looked, and everything else smelled like a potato, it did not give any roots, and it did not produce a next generation of potatoes. So again, we don't want to criticize hundreds of thousands of people, but we should know that it's better to stick to our traditions and to stay with them, and that assures the Jewish continuity. And last paragraph, the mitzvah of reciting the Shema in principle may also be fulfilled with a translation. However, some doubt was raised regarding the accuracy of the translation of a number of words. For example, Maimonides says that the word echad doesn't mean one before two or three or four or five, but rather one that is so unique and singular that there's no comparison to anything else in the world. Rabbi Wallerstein added that actually that is what B'Tselem Elokim means. In the image of God is that there will never be another Yosef Goldman. There never was a Yosef Goldman. I'm not talking about the name. I'm talking about the soul and the purpose and the personality that it makes who I am. And of course, I can mention all four of you, but it's not the point. The point is just to say that we are unique because that's how God wanted it. And scientists have found that nobody in the world has the same fingerprint like us, and nobody in the world has the eye retina, I think it is. So all of these things are so special, and that's how I focus when I say the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hashem Echad, it means that it's so unique that there's nothing else like it. And so he concludes, therefore today, in the opinion of some eminent Achronim, late Torah authorities or scholars, one cannot fulfill his obligation of reciting the Shema by saying a translation of the words. And I think I'll end with a quick story. When I was in the tank corps and we were learning how to be a team of four, the loader, I was the driver, and he asked the commander if he knows the words of the first verse of the Shema. And he said, why? And he said, because I'm not going into a tank with you unless you have the same basic belief that I have in the one and only God. And so it's very, very important to teach our kids and to teach whoever we can how to say the Shema properly. And I'll end with that. Question